Hello, Internet. Happy Wednesday. I'm going to be doing my weekly Constitution study group and going to use today to talk about individual rights that are laid out in the Constitution and what we can do with those rights, and talk about my own expression that I have been working on over the past few weeks with what has been going on in our society and our community of the heightened awareness of inequalities and marginalization of entire communities of people. Um, you know what I can do. It's definitely been a lot of social pressure for all of us to do things as individuals, as brands, as businesses. So, yes, I am using my brand's platform for having these conversations and doing this work. And I want to do more. I want to be more progressive, more of a change maker. And this is not a new thing for me. I've been social justice warrior for a long time now, and really heeded to advice that I've received over the years that I shouldn't use my brand's platform for that. I should be using my brand's platform for business, which is true. And I do that. But especially in a case like now, and even in normal times, a brand's platform can definitely be used for communicate. That's what a brand is, right? It's to communicate a message, to communicate a value. And the value that I've always wanted to communicate with my brand and the work that I do is one of transparency, of trust, of leadership. So, yeah, there's definitely a place for that. So, in the past weeks, I've been doing this Constitution study group for it's been over a month now, and have actually read through all of the Constitution. And, can of course revisit it again and look at things again, but and then also look at the origin of that document. And so I was kind of diving into that a little bit. That's a bit more cumbersome and a lot more content, which is the Federalist Papers, written by the founding fathers, that were the basis of what would later become the Constitution. So perhaps in the near future, I will be looking at those and reading through those and kind of understanding the origin of some of the content of the actual Constitution. So a lot of what is written in the Constitution is outlining the rights of the government, the rights of, or the duties and responsibilities, in addition to the rights of the different branches, as well as the division between federal and state power. There is actually very little written about the rights of the people themselves. Um, and ultimately, when you dig deep into it, you see that really the only right that we have, um, to actually make any change, to actually be a part of the process, is one, through voting, and two, through communicating with our representation on every level, on the local level, on the state level, and as well as on the federal level. There is power in that. It may not feel like there's a lot of power in that, but that's ultimately the only power that we have, the only rights that we have in being a part of the process. And so I want to utilize this platform for empowering that right and doing that through an event that's going to be happening on Saturday, So that's just in a few days. This is going to be from 2 p.m. to 5 p.m. Pacific time. So afternoon or evening, and the event is actually targeted to an international audience, just as these conversations and study groups are targeted towards even an international audience. There's a lot to be learned in discussions about the American political system and the constitutional system. Even if you aren't American, there's a lot to be learned. The freest country in the world, the longest living constitution, and a lot of that is being questioned right now. So it's very useful for everybody to be a part of that conversation and to understand what's going on there. So I welcome everybody to be a part of what is called the Festival for Progress. This entire event will be done virtually through a live stream, just like this conversation is being had. But it is going to be a much larger audience and also a much larger and diverse collection of co-creators that are working with us. And so that's what I'm going to use today to talk about the co-creators that are going to be a part of it. So first and foremost, shout out to the main co-creator that I'm working with on this, Marcus. Marcus Tweedy, I met him here in Las Vegas while he was working as a community organizer for a national level project called the Green Team. He was like a grassroots agent, a consultant of sorts actually, that was working for an initiative to bring awareness and community action, a nonpartisan community action around climate change, specifically around the Clean Economy Bill that's currently being voted upon. So a lot of the work that he was doing is very much related to these constitutional rights that we have as individuals, as citizens, of writing to your Congress people. And so at the events that I had met him at, there was a lot of postcard writing. He would distribute scripts for us to call our representatives and leave messages in support of voting for this specific bill. And so, yeah, that is definitely constitutional work for the citizen. And I was very educated in my interactions with him and with that organization, and with how non-political and non-partisan civic engagement can be. And I think that that's something really important. People are often shying away from civic engagement because it is so political, because it is so polarizing. And I'm now starting to see that political party system that we're working within, that bipartisan system, that polarizing system, has nothing to do with the Constitution at all. It has nothing to do with being American at all. And so, once I let go of that, my enthusiasm for civic engagement increased significantly. So thank you for that experience, Marcus. And so Marcus actually left that organization, at the beginning of the pandemic to be closer to home. He's based in Colorado, actually, with his family. So he left Vegas. And I had stayed in touch with him, just because we both had a mutual appreciation of community development and progressive efforts in our society. And I was having a few chats with him, and he had seen the work that I was doing, and even with the virtual tea festival, and was impressed with the audiences that were being pulled together for that, and feeling a bit of a lack of movement especially with the current conditions and limitations that we have with COVID, he was seeing a lack of innovation within the activism industry that he's a part of, that he wants to remain a part of. And so he had this idea of innovating that, utilizing the tools that I had already started innovating upon. Not to say that live streaming is, like very advanced modern technology. It's been around for a long time. We've had the ability to live stream videos for over a decade now. But the tools available and then the engagement levels are so much higher now, that it is a very feasible technology and innovation to activities that tended to be kind of outdated. They were effective. They've been effective for a long time, of activism, of grassroots, specifically grassroots activism, is based off of a lot of phone calling, is based off of a lot of events, in-person events, which right now technically we shouldn't be doing, and door knocking too. That's another thing that is impossible to do now. And so this industry of grassroots activism has really kind of been put on pause. So yeah, he said, I want to innovate. And when I hear something like that, I think entrepreneurship. And so, I'd asked him some questions about his intent and his passion. And then, like the reality of, are you prepared to become an entrepreneur? It's one thing to dream about it and to feel, yeah, I want to do something cool and good. It's another thing to actually be prepared to put in the work that entrepreneurship requires. And he really impressed me with his willingness to do it. And so I said, okay, let's do it. I want to help you create a business. So yeah, I'm creating a whole new business now, and it's related to providing grassroots services to initiatives or potentially even political campaigns that are seeking these innovative and engaging ways of activating the community. And so we decided to put on a pilot program, so that's Saturday's program. And this had actually all happened and was starting to become organized even before the global protests that are happening now, and additionally to the protest, also this interest and kind of intimidation by a very significant community of people that want to do something, that want to learn what they can do, but don't necessarily want to protest or don't necessarily feel it's their place to be initiating these conversations, whatever that conversation may be. There's so many different conversations. There's not just one conversation. There's a lot, and so it's good timing that Marcus and I wanted to put this event on, because people are hungry. People are hungry to activate. People are hungry to understand their rights and duties and roles in uplifting the community. So that's what we're doing. So Marcus will be emceeing the event. He has been instrumental in engaging his network of different justice fighters in the community, and not just from Nevada, but we also have speakers from other parts of the country, and also a very diverse group of topics that will be discussed with a pre-recorded presentation, which I've already recorded most of those presentations, so I've heard their talks and I've seen their passion and understand what they're bringing to the table. And each of these presentations will be followed with a live Q&A. And then at the very end of the event, for the last about hour or so, we will be hosting conversations, community roundtable conversations in breakout rooms, in a more interactive portion of the event through, private Zoom rooms. So these conversations and connections and calls to action can be extended further beyond just the live presentation. So I am going to, in all of these activities, all of this engagement, like I know it just seems like, okay, that's just some Facebook something. It's just a video we're gonna watch. Like this is literally like all of our rights as a citizen, as explained in the Constitution, manifested. It is the most civically engaging thing that we can do aside from voting. Right? Voting is number one. I would understand someone's perspective that voting is not as effective as it could be. I don't want to say it's useless because, I think that argument is completely invalid, but it could be better, specifically around the current system, like the incumbent system, as well as the options that we have when we do go vote. The options are not as diverse, they're not as empowering, as probably most of us would want them to be. Voting is great, but when we get in there and we see what options we have for voting, it can be discouraging. So yeah, it's not effective. We are not voting for the people and the issues that we really do want to be voting for. But the only way we're going to get to a point where voting will feel more effective and will feel more representative of who we are as citizens and as communities is if we put in the work now of activating and of uplifting the leaders and giving them the confidence and the empowerment to get to that position of actually being on a ballot for us to have the option to vote for. So it's a cultural shift that we are responsible in doing. And so that's why I feel engaging with an event like we're having on Saturday, this Festival for Progress, is the most powerful expression of our rights as defined in the Constitution. So our first speaker is Philip Merrick. He is with the Sunrise Movement, which is a youth-oriented climate activism group. So he'll be talking about climate change and about what we can be doing as youth, what we can be doing with our resources and our power and our rights to make changes that affect our climate. Then we will have Jack Rosen. He is a disability rights activist. He has his own personal story of why he got engaged with disability rights, representing disability rights. And then he'll also be providing some calls to action about how we can better. His presentation's a trip too, because there are some violations of Constitution within what he's talking about immediately and blatant about how 20% of registered voters have disabilities. And there's a wide range of disabilities. He's not talking about the disabilities in particular. But many of those disabilities can be inhibiting for a person from even being able to physically vote or to receive information about the vote. So that was fascinating. It's something that I don't think about too often. So, I know that there's a lot of attention being given for just reason to the disparity in power and privilege to different skin color or race or economic position. But then, there are other things that are affected by disparities in privilege, and disabilities being one of them. So I'm so grateful that Marcus included his talk with this presentation. Then we'll have Cynthia Moore. She's the director of the Las Vegas chapter of Moms Clean Air Force. So another talk around climate change. But what's really interesting is that first we're having the youth perspective, which is a lot more forward thinking, infrastructure thinking, activism for the future. See, Bitcoin, he gets fired up about that too. And then Cynthia's presentation, she's a mother. And, I think their organization is over 1 million strong, very large organization of mothers across the country that have more pragmatic issues and calls to action about things that we need to be doing right now, mostly to protect our children and to protect our water and to protect our environment. So, and she has a lot of calls to action as well of things that are being decided upon right now. And legislation and voting, all of that has not been put on pause. So, I know it feels like a lot of our life has been put on pause because of pandemic and just because of everything, all the intensity in our lives right now. But these things are still going on. And so our opportunities to call our representatives, to write letters, to voice, to voice these stories and voice these ideas are all still happening right now. We shouldn't forget about it. So we will then have Mark Benincourt from the Nevada Coalition Against the Death Penalty. His talk has a lot of staggering numbers, around even the inefficiency of death penalty, regardless of the distribution of how the death penalty is enforced against different marginalized groups, which is truth. Same thing with the prison system. And law enforcement in general. But it's really interesting to see that conversation specifically from the perspective of death penalty. Because, that's a very specific part of law enforcement, a part of justice that I think we don't like to talk about, And actually, I was contemplating focusing on the death penalty in my conversation today, and maybe I'll revisit that a little bit later. But the constitutional status of the death penalty is not a new conversation, not a new conversation at all. In fact, there is a very big divide among the different states in the country about the legality of death penalty, and there are several states that for over 100 years have not been using the death penalty, while other states, like the one that I'm in, have been using it heavily. And there is a lot of disparity in the rights and the even the exoneration of innocent people that have been put on death row among different social, economic class and races of people. So, but the Supreme Court, the U.S. Supreme Court, did rule that the death penalty was unconstitutional because of our Eighth Amendment, the Eighth Amendment, which states no cruel or unusual punishment for prisoners. And so, I think that there is going to be still, for a long time, a lot of debate around that. And I think the Supreme Court had actually even repealed their decision, but then had ruled that certain forms of death penalty were unconstitutional. Um, Public lynchings, public beheadings, uh, those are all have been ruled unconstitutional. Um, and additionally, something that surprised me when I was listening to his presentation, and I hope that you all get to join on Saturday to hear, is the excessive kind of waste of resources, specifically money, around the death penalties. So, yeah, anything to save money and be more frugal is worth a conversation right now. Then we will have a presentation from the Nevada Conservation League. I have not seen that presentation yet, so I can't give any specifics about what would be there, but we will have a live Q&A with Brandon Cunningham after that presentation. And then our last presentation will be from Cy Bernabe from the Gender Justice of Nevada organization, talking about essentially about sexism and much deeper and sexism as it deals with gender and in general, and trans, the whole spectrum. There's actually a lot to be mindful of, and she gives a lot of tips and actionable strategies about how to approach even our own peers in the community around this. I know that there is a lot of intimidation around how do we communicate effectively and hold space for others in our community that we probably just don't understand their perspective. And then after her live Q&A, we will have breakout rooms by different organizations that will be facilitating the conversation. So you can choose what kind of conversations you want to have and who you want to join in those rooms. So the whole event will be about 3 hours, very short, very engaging event. So you will leave with lots of action items, lots of calls to action, activities that you can do. And a lot of those activities, like as I was talking to Marcus about how to make this more effective, I told him, we need to show these activities, such as calling your senator, another constitutional right that we have after voting, our next constitutional right we have. And speaking to our representatives about our perspective and how our perspective can be involved in policy making. That's an intimidating thing, so I told you the story of how I met Marcus here in Vegas, and he had these calls of action. Write a postcard to your congressperson and we'll mail it for you. Here, write it right here and then we'll mail it for you. And it's like these things get documented and logged into a spreadsheet. And I suppose it's like voting, like they'll see who sent the most letters on what topic. And then that helps with understanding their constituents and what their values are in the policy-making process. What's unfortunate about that is that that's like the same channel of power that we as individuals, as citizens, can tap into. We can tap into it. But it's the exact same channel that lobbyists that are heavily funded by corporate interests, they have. And it almost makes me think, like in that spreadsheet, if we get, 1,000 people to submit an idea and give that perspective to their representative, that may be of equal or less value to one lobbyist that is sharing a different perspective. And So yeah, there's a lot of power in lobbyists, and so I'm really enthusiastic about putting in my work towards empowering that channel towards a more distributed system, towards a more democratic system, the people. So, rather than just saying you can write to your senator and here's a script of what you can write to them, I think it would be really impactful to show what that process looks like. So, actually, live calling a senator, having that conversation, or leaving that message. A lot of times that's what it is. It's just you leave a message and that gets ticked off in their spreadsheet. Yeah, I should research that more. Maybe ask around to friends that work, for Congress people or for senators, how that, like, what is the balance between the power of lobbyists versus the power of the citizens' voices, and how might we uplift this power? Not to say that lobbyists and corporations shouldn't have a say, um, but their say should not be exclusive, and it should not be more powerful than the say of the citizens. That's what I would think. Because I own a corporation, I run a corporation, so I understand the needs of staying engaged with policy and making sure that as a corporation, as a stakeholder in the system, just as the citizens are a stakeholder in that system, the intentions and the values of each of those stakeholders should have a say. But definitely, the lobbyists, the corporate stakeholders, have a much more powerful say, and a lot of that is around money. And so, I don't know. Maybe we just got to bring more value to the citizen to be able to uplift their power in that channel. Because that's our rights. That's what the Constitution protects for us. And unfortunately, the Constitution didn't protect a whole lot for us. The voting, and even the voting, there is like a nasty conversation around that. Around once you're a criminal, then you lose that right. You actually lose like kind of all your rights once you're a criminal. And the distribution of criminalization in our communities is very biased towards marginalized communities, especially communities of color, and now immigration communities. They're all kind of under the same bracket now of, shit out of rights. So then, we have, like, in the Bill of Rights, there's several criminal rights that we have. For instance, in regards to, the argument of the constitutionality of the death penalty, the Eighth Amendment, outlines that even criminals have certain rights. Except for in the 13th Amendment. The 13th Amendment, which is not part of the Bill of Rights, that came after, but in the 13th Amendment, which abolished slavery, also, kind of put in that stipulation. Well, if you're a criminal and a prisoner, you're not excluded from that. And there are also corporations that exploit that. And I think there's probably a whole list. Let me see. I heard that there's a website that shows all the companies that utilize like prison labor. Including, I had heard that Mike Bloomberg and his in his run for the Democratic presidential candidate had utilized prison labor. Victoria's Secret. In the 1990s, Victoria's Secret used prison labor to sew clothes, inspiring a storyline in season 3. Oh, that's interesting. Of Orange is the New Black. In which prisoners were they made 45 cents to sew a $90 piece of laundry. So not specifically slavery, but kind of there. Whole Foods Market. Until 2015, Whole Foods sold goat cheese and tilapia from companies that used prison labor, paying pennies on the dollar in wages. After pushback from consumers, the company stopped selling products that use inmate labor. Walmart says it won't sell products made from prison labor, but the company still contracts companies that use inmate labor to dispose of customer returns and excess inventory. In the 1990s, Microsoft hired Washington state prisoners to package software and mouses. At the time, a spokesperson said, "We don't see this as a negative." Starbucks has used prison labor to package coffee sold in its stores. Prisoners may earn as little as 23 cents an hour, meaning they might make less than $50 for an entire year of full-time work. Make less than $500. After the Deepwater Horizon explosion in 2010, BP hired Louisiana prison inmates to clean up the oil spill. The workers were not paid. Nintendo hired a subcontractor called Signature Packaging Solutions to package their Nintendo Game Boys. So yeah, lots of stories here. In 2000, Target used suppliers that rely on prison labor. Earlier in the 90s, big corporations like AT&T and Microsoft hired inmates, but most backed away after the arrangements were exposed. And it goes on and on. So, interesting, right? There was a project when I was in Hawaii studying tea there. There was a project which we had just explored that was trying to match inmates with agriculture work. And supposedly the workers were going to be paid, the full wage, but it was like government subsidized. I didn't research the program more because it was, we just saw that as an option for farmers that were seeking more affordable labor. Because tea farming, especially in the beginning, like when you're first clearing land and you're doing things organically, so there's a lot of weeding involved, there's a lot of labor in the field involved. And in Hawaii, to legally hire somebody and legally employ them, your hourly rate, which is not just the wage, that's the wage, it's the taxes, it's the benefits, and that's all the other required things in the state of Hawaii, is $21 an hour, which for, a new tea farmer that's already invested so much in all the infrastructure to acquire their tea plants and to plant their tea plants, doesn't have the cash flow to support labor at that level. So it just seems like kind of a win-win to work within this program. And when I read about the program, the intention, from the government side and why they were subsidizing this and supporting this was a life skills training program. So not only is it employment, but it's employment in food, in agriculture, which has very deep impacts in someone's mental health and in someone's ability to work within society and work in a peaceful way within society. And I know Hawaii has some other really cool, like, homestead programs that support marginalized, mostly Hawaiian, because those are the marginalized populations in Hawaii, are the actual local people, the actual Hawaiian people that have been colonized. The homestead programs that give very low risk leases of land to Hawaiian citizens that will use that land exclusively for agriculture. So, yeah, agriculture has a very positive position, even within our justice system. But yeah, I didn't know. I didn't research further to see what the value system of that labor program, that prison labor program, was like. But it seems that there are a whole lot of corrupt kind of semi-enslavement systems, definitely indentured labor systems within the prison system. But yeah, our rights. We have freedom of speech. That's cool. We'll be exercising that right on Saturday. It's the same thing when you call your senator. You're exercising that right. Calling your senator every day, with that message and sharing with your friends to do that is, a different channel, but a similar exercise of our freedom of speech, as is protesting. Both are valid. There is some argument about which one is more effective. I err on the side of non-confrontation. Not because I'm passive-aggressive, but because I'm a communicator. So, but that's just my personal. Everybody has the right to exercise that right how they want to. But I know that there's a lot of uncertainty and insecurity around. Okay, I'm part of the problem. I want to do something to help correct this problem. And for the past weeks, the popular option, the popular opinion, the popular solution has been, well, go protest. That's what we're doing right now. Or post something to your social media and let the world know your opinion, which is also a valid exercise of that right as well. But finding out what policies are currently on the table that are currently being discussed by our representatives and are currently being voted upon, and engaging with that information and sharing that information is also a very valid channel. And so in my work of utilizing this brand's channel and building community and sharing information and protecting our constitutional education, that's what I want to do. We also have the right for arms. That's cool. I'm not into guns. But, I do believe in personal protection, and so I'm not against the Second Amendment. I understand it. I'm definitely very passionate about more cultural education around violence, because anything can be the source of violence, not just a gun. So, I don't like how the conversation always just goes directly to guns. There's a bigger conversation to be had around violence and when it's appropriate or not appropriate. And guns, I think, just make it very easy to make violence seem appropriate when it probably isn't. Communication so much more effective. Hey, Patrick, you gonna drive through town soon? Awesome. Just come visit. We'll drink some tea together. I haven't had much much guest in my tea room here, so it would be nice to have you around. Yeah, let me know when you come through. And Saturday, Patrick, I hope you are able, you and Marie. I know Marie was asking how to engage with it, so I hope she got my note. But the Festival for Progress will be happening, and we have several very good speakers talking about different efforts to bring social justice and social mobilization to a lot of the issues that have been spoke on and may seem intimidating and unapproachable, but they're all very approachable. Everything is. So yeah, that starts on 2 o'clock on Saturday, the 20th, which I think, Friday is meant to be a very active day. And so I'm hoping that this event would be a continuation of that action. This event is not associated with any initiative or any political group or any fundraising effort. It's really just a co-created discussion among various justice fighters in our society that have dedicated their lives and are now happy to see people want to hear. And so we want to create that platform for them to share their voice and their calls to action of how. And it's so interesting, like we put this program together and called together a diverse group of co-creators that are talking about climate, gender, death penalty, as well as disability rights. And in each of their presentation, each of them addresses race. And they would have been addressing race even before, the protests have started. So it's pretty obvious to me that that race is deeply ingrained in all of these issues, and yeah, it's crazy. So it'll be a little bit of an education, but not just an education. And it's good. Everybody is hungry for education right now. I actually just watched the documentary everybody's been sharing on Netflix called 13th, around the 13th Amendment. So talking about Constitution Study Group. I recommend it. You can watch it. A lot of education around some of the things I've been talking about today, but really about the disproportionate number. I think the most staggering statistic that I was seeing here. Let's see. I want to get the numbers right. That's here we go. Well, so 1 in 17 white men have a likelihood of being in prison at some time in their life. 1 in 3 black men has a likelihood of being imprisoned sometime throughout their life. And then the other staggering statistic is that 6.5% of the US population is black men, but then 40.2% of prison population is black men. So just really and there's a lot of issues of this, but ultimately the issues are deeply ingrained, and it is very true that these people are responsible for their own actions, and their own actions very well could have warranted them the need to be imprisoned or, to have some type of criminality assigned to them. But there's deep things that they're up against that us as a society and our government as policymakers are either empowering or enabling, that could be turned, could be changed. And so that's where our power lies, is in encouraging that change through our action, through our voice. So I hope you guys join on Saturday, because that will be a very effective way to learn what you can do. And that will be streamed on Facebook. It'll be streamed across all of our channels, YouTube and Twitch and Periscope. But Facebook would be a good place to watch and see conversation, because then we'll have all of the chat and the questions, where you can submit your questions. And so, yeah, you can just access that from TLET's Facebook page. And it'll be playing from 2 to 5. We'll be streaming it there. So I think that covers my Constitution Study Group conversation I wanted to have today around our personal rights, our citizen rights, to vote, to communicate with our representation, and just to speak, to express, and to learn, and to be engaged. And that right there is, I think, it is potentially being challenged. And so we got to exercise that as much as we can while we can right now. Cool. There are no more questions here. So I'm going to go. Thank you so much for joining today. I hope it's been inspiring, and I hope, you mark your calendars down. If you want to RSVP so that you get a reminder, I have a reminder on Instagram Live, or not Instagram Live, in our stories. If you go to our stories, there's a button there that you can get a reminder of when it's starting, so you'll be notified. And then also, if you visit the link, I'll type it into the chats. If you go to the link bit.ly/Festival for Progress, you'll be able to RSVP and sign up on the, oh, that's interesting. I got logged out. Good to see you, Shiloh. Hope to see you on Saturday, for the Festival for Progress. Not going to be a whole lot of tea talk. There will be a lot of talk, a lot of very serious, important conversations being had. So, with calls of action too. So this is not just going to be depressing. I think a lot of the rhetoric and a lot of the education that's going around right now, and it's necessary education, but a lot of it is quite depressing and negative, without that call to action. And so that's what I told Marcus when we do this event. I want to make sure that there are actionable strategies proposed, and there's such a diverse range of topics that we'll be on. So what I'd recommend, if you're trying to become more civically engaged and find your voice and find your activism, find a issue or a topic that you already have been passionate about and get engaged with that, versus trying to attach yourself to every issue that's being bombarded in our faces right now. It can be intimidating and cumbersome to feel like we have to solve everything. Yes, lots of important discussions. Um, some controversial. We'll see. I'm looking forward to seeing how the community reacts, to what gets discussed. But the presenters that are there are all people that have been activists and advocates on those topics and within those communities for years, if not decades. So, you know, someone like me would not be equipped. Now, if you want to talk about, sovereignty and autonomy of commodity laborers, yeah, I'd be happy to talk about that. But a lot of these topics that we'll be talking about on Saturday are issues that are a bit more domestic, that I don't have involvement in. I'm just holding the space for these conversations to be had, and I just feel like that's all I can offer to all this activism that's happening right now. And I'm not just going to use a hashtag that has a very deep backstory to it, that I'm not, and a very partisan backstory to it. This is, I like to attach myself to initiatives that are nonpartisan, that are community forming. But I'm definitely going to talk about the issues and give voices to those issues, just not that hashtag and not that initiative. So Shiloh says, good tips. Thank you. Definitely need to personalize the approach so that we can better apply concepts both individually and as a community. Yep. Yeah, you got to simplify things in a relatable way. Humanitarian at its core. Yep. We are humans. We got to be humanitarians too, take care of ourselves. So yeah, very complex issues here. And I want to try to simplify them, because at the core of them, yeah, they're not complex. We're just humans. We're just trying to connect. We're just trying to find our autonomy and find our sovereignty in this. So, and our autonomy and sovereignty is based upon the autonomy and sovereignty of someone else, of everybody else. Not just focusing on our own. Yeah. So. Cool. Well, Shiloh, thank you so much for your contribution and for engaging. I look forward to seeing you on Saturday. As well as at the end of the month, I saw that you had noticed that event, the panel. I'll start promoting it by, I think tomorrow I'll start promoting it on our channels, but that should be a good panel talking about, the long history and stories of heritage as well as colonization within tea. So yeah, that conversation will be very much focused on tea, and a very prestigious panel of women. Not all tea professionals, all women that have some kind of connection with tea. Yeah, so I'm looking forward to that. That should be a pretty wild and important conversation. But most recently, Saturday, we are doing the Festival for Progress. You'll find it on our Facebook. I probably will be live streaming it to Instagram as well. I'll figure out some way to get it on there as well, or at least, drive people to join the conversation on. Yeah, I like the panel choices too. I'm honored to be included in it. The other women have very deep roots and connections with China, which I don't have, but I think that's what they wanted me to offer. Registered. Awesome. Bye, guys. See ya tomorrow.